This is the world's first 40 watt diode laser head by xTool. It'll set you back $1,000 as an upgrade if you already have the xTool D1 Pro like I do. If you don't have the xTool D1 Pro and you want to get in, it'll cost you at least $1,600. Your thought is probably just like my thought, which is, that seems like a lot of money for a diode laser. And so I'm interested in seeing if this thing is worth all the hype and worth the money, and I'm gonna show you what I found. In this video, I'm gonna show you what's new, what sucks, what xTool does to be a little bit different from the rest of the crowd. We'll test a couple of different materials and we'll push the 40 watt head to its limits. I'll explain what I've been looking for in a 40 watt head for my woodworking business and how I plan on using it. We'll talk through some pricing options and specifically how xTool has undercut the competition on price by 4x. And then I'll answer the question, should anybody splurge on a 40 watt when a 20 watt seems to be just as good? What's new? Well, first of all, it's bigger, and it should be. They've packed 8 5 watt diode lasers into this thing. My favorite part about the new head is that it has air assist actually integrated and built in, whereas in the other models, it comes in on this side. Now, one benefit to doing that is now the magnetic shield is magnetic, which means you can pop it off and clean the soot very, very easy. That was one complaint I had with the 20 watt. You actually have to take the head off of the gantry, unscrew some screws from the back, take the air assist off just to get access to clean the thing. But because the air assist is built into the 40 watt, all you have to do is take off the magnetic shield, you can clean the soot off and be back in business pretty quickly. It's one of my favorite features. Because there are 8 diode lasers in this body, it's going to create a lot of heat, and so it has better heat dissipation. It should. And how they do this is they put fans on the side instead of just one fan on the top. Now, this seems to work really, really well in my test. And one thing to note is that it is pretty loud. For whatever reason, and a surprise to me, is that when you get the new 40 watt head, it's not just the new head that you get. You actually have to swap out the gantry, the motherboard, and the limit switches, and so you get an upgrade on all of those items. And speaking of swapping out the gantry, it's time to move on to what sucks. I was not looking forward to this. When I got the new 40 watt head in the mail, I was surprised that the box was bigger. And then when I opened it up and saw there was a motherboard and a new gantry and an instruction booklet, which is actually pretty good, by the way, I thought, oh my goodness, this is gonna take some work, at least 45 minutes or an hour. Now, other reviewers have said it's pretty easy, and so that gave me a little bit of confidence to do it. And swapping out the motherboard and swapping out the gantry was pretty easy. But when it came to swapping out the limit switches, because the physical size on this is different, I ran into one stubborn Allen screw, whatever you call it. I'm triggered still from it, and I spent the better part of half a day trying to get this screw out. I made a big mistake and I stripped the screw, and then I went to thinking I could just epoxy the Allen key in, and that didn't work. I thought I could use a screw extractor bit. Well, that didn't work either. And thanks to all the great people on Instagram, so many people said, just use a cutoff wheel, cut a slot and use a flathead screwdriver. I forgot I had a Dremel, but I put on safety glasses and I took a Dremel to the screw, and to my surprise, with a flathead screwdriver, I was able to back this screw out. There's a reason why I was dragging my feet on doing this. Now, besides making Drew Fisher proud by working with a flathead screwdriver, that really was frustrating. Now, I'm sure anyone else doing this probably didn't have that issue, but for whatever reason, just one of the screws on the limit switches was really stuck into my frame. Once I got that out of the way, everything was fine. The instructions were actually really good and amazing. The pictures were clear, they were easy to follow. A normal person could probably swap it out in 30 to 45 minutes. It took me several hours because sometimes I'm an idiot when it comes to these things. One more thing that sucks, and that is if you have a regular D1, a 40 watt will not work for you because it uses 24 volts, and the regular D1 apparently uses 12 volts. So if you have a D1 from the old days and you think you can just swap out your 5 watt head or your 10 watt head for a 40 watt, it's not going to work. You have to have the D1 Pro frame, as best as I understand it. There are so many laser companies out there these days, and it begs the question, why xTool? I receive emails daily from so many companies I've never heard of, I can't pronounce their name, and the lasers all look identical, and they basically beg me and so many other people to take their free laser and do a video on it. Almost all of the companies look sketchy, I can't pronounce their name, and all the lasers basically look the same, and the emails start with, "Hi dear." I mean, you can't even learn my name, it's literally in the channel. And this is so bad amongst YouTubers that Chad from Chad's Custom Creations and I have a running joke that every time we get an email from a laser company wanting us to do a laser review and it starts with, "Hi dear," you have to take a drink of Dr. Pepper. Ugh. Man, my kidneys really hurt. Now, to be completely honest, I ignore every single one of those emails. At this point, they go straight to spam and I don't even see them. All of the tool sponsors that I work with on my channel, I have initiated contact with. If a tool company reaches out to me, almost all the time, I ignore them. About a year ago, I did a bunch of research because I wanted a laser engraver like you probably do. And I came to the conclusion that xTool was probably one of the best, and I was planning on spending my money with them. I like them for a couple of reasons. First, their design seemed to be better than all of the competition. Now, looks don't really matter when it comes to a laser engraver, but I care about the way things are visually, and so that was just a thing in xTool's favor. Is I like good design, and it was almost like Apple designed these lasers, so I liked them for that reason. The second reason I liked xTool is because the build quality. When you look at all the other cheap lasers, and I've actually tried to work with one, they use off-the-shelf parts. They use rubber pulleys and V-wheels, and they're just not built to last, and they use kind of standard aluminum extrusions. What I like about xTool is their build quality is head and shoulders above the competition for the most part. The third thing I love about xTool, and you can see this on almost every review ever done, is their packing. When you get the thing in the mail, you have no worries that things are going to be damaged in packing. The attention to detail that they've put in manufacturing these products, they've put into packaging and having custom Kaizen foam inserts, and it's a really, really fun experience opening a package from xTool. Almost every reviewer mentions this, and they're right. But fourth, and the most important part of the reason why I think xTool is different, is they're a strong innovator, and the way that they've built their system is that as they innovate and as they grow, you can just swap out the heads. When I was first looking at buying one a year ago, they had 5-watt lasers, and then they came out with a 10-watt head. And by the time I got the 10-watt head in the summer, they had a 20-watt head. And then in the fall, they came out with an IR head, and now they have a 40-watt head. They're constantly innovating, and what I love, unless you have the D1, is that if you have their D1 Pro, you can swap the heads and swap motherboards and gantries and grow as the technology is rapidly increasing. With other companies, especially the cheaper ones, one, you don't have the innovation, and two, you don't have the future-proof built in the design. Now, personally, I was planning on spending my money with xTool, and I reached out to them and asked what are the chances that they would want to partner with me on my channel, and I was delighted and surprised to even get a response back, and they loved what I do here, and they've been a great partner for the last year. That said, I would still use my own money and buy these lasers even if I wasn't sponsored or partnered with them. They're that good. Material test. One of the first things I did was cut some cardboard. Now it's kind of crazy because you don't need 40 watts to cut cardboard, but I like to test for accuracy and spacing and where the laser offset is, and I'm glad I did because in this laser you had to adjust the Y offset to I think -21 and set the X offset to 0 to get the laser to line up with its preview mark. And that's a pro tip for anyone using lasers, is just keep cardboard scraps on hands. I just cut boxes from Amazon up, and I always use cardboard before I go to cut plywood or MDF or acrylic, especially if I'm testing something that needs to be accurate. Cardboard is the way to go before you go and start working on your actual material. Cutting 1/2-inch plywood was actually a breeze. I was surprised by how fast it cut. and I shouldn't be that surprised because this is a 40 watt. I personally wouldn't consider cutting anything beyond 1/2 inch because at that point you start to get burning. And this is a mallet I made a while ago with the 20 watt head, and even with the 20 watt head you see these char marks on the handle, and you'd be better off just using a CNC like I did on this walnut. If I'm doing deep cuts, I'm not going to use a laser, I'm going to use a CNC. But for everything 1/2 inch and under for wood, I like using a laser because there's no sawdust. Now, one of the things you're not going to see me do in this video is test a 2x4. I did that on the 20 watt version, but the reason why I'm not doing it on this version is because number one, it's impractical, and number two, it's pretty dangerous. A pine has a lot of resin in it, and so much so when you sand it through something like a drum sander, you can ruin your sandpaper in one shot like I did on my drum sander. And when you shoot 40 watts of laser beam into a resinous wood like that at a low speed, you're asking for a fire. And that's something that I take seriously, and I'm not trying to burn down my shop or burn down my work area. And since I would never need to cut a 2x4 with my laser, I don't even test it because it's kind of ridiculous. It's fun looking, but ridiculous. The main reason why I wanted a laser is to see if I could cut 3/8 of an inch MDF. On my 20 watt, I could not cut 3/8. I could get close, but it could never do the final passes. And as I slowed the laser down and went to 100% power on the 20 watt, I would always set off the flame alarm. And so I was limited to cutting 1/4 inch MDF on my 20 watt laser. So here's some shots of me cutting the 1/4 inch MDF. I'll put the material settings on the screen, and I was pleasantly surprised with how fast and how flame-free cutting 1/4 inch MDF was. I immediately jumped to 3/8 inch MDF and was surprised as well and got very clean cuts, no flaming. I'm very happy with that. I was really interested in how it would cut through 1/4 inch black acrylic. Now you can't cut through clear acrylic on this technology, the beam will just go through it. And so you have to have some kind of color, some pigment to give resistance to the beam. I think that's how it works. And so I didn't have any thick black, so I went to a plastic store by me and I spent $20 on this 1 foot by 1 foot sheet of 1/4 inch black acrylic. I was surprised at how it did cut, and I was really looking forward to loving this. And I gotta say, while I was able to cut through 1/4 inch black acrylic, I would personally not recommend it for a couple of reasons. Is first of all, the smell. I was using an enclosure with air assist, with a smoke purifier and a fan to get everything out, and I could still immediately smell the foul smell of plastic burning. I immediately opened my garage door and the side door to get some cross ventilation, and the only mask I had available was one of these, and I wish I had a respirator. And so for the time of me cutting, I stood about 5 feet away. I could still see, I had a camera inside so I could monitor everything. But even standing outside my garage with this mask on, with an enclosure, with a smoke purifier, I could still smell the fumes. And after cutting one sheet, I just wasn't comfortable risking my health or risking air quality any more than I already was in doing this. Now, upon inspecting the parts, I was impressed that they cut. However, it separated in the middle. I think these things got really, really hot, and I'm not sure if this is a fault of the xTool head or if this is just the material failing. But like I said, I didn't have the right respirator, and I really didn't want to risk my health just messing around with black acrylic. Now, the only reason why I, as a woodworker, am interested in things like a 40 watt laser is I want to cut router templates. And I've been able to do that with the 20 watt using 1/4 inch, but for a router bit bearing, I want a little bit more, and so my preference would be at least 3/8 inch MDF, and I just can't cut that on my xTool D1 Pro 20 watt. But with the 40 watt, I was able to, and this is kind of a cool project I've been working on. I have this Makita trim router, and I'm designing a small router table that you can drop one of these red plates in, and I want to be able to create a 2-part template where you can route the middle all the way through and then pull out a piece of the template and then route partially into the tabletop to get a perfect flush fit. And I was able to do that with the black acrylic, which I thought would be a great option. But with the 3/8 MDF, I think that's going to be the option for me moving forward. One, it's cheaper, and two, it doesn't have the toxic smell. I could cut this on my CNC. However, I want to use a 2-part template, which is very, very unique, and I haven't seen a whole lot of this on the market. And if I were to use a CNC bit, I would have to cut those templates separately. But with the laser, there's like a very, very, very small line, and it's perfect. I'm really impressed with this, and I plan on batching out a ton of these router templates with the 40-watt head. I also love this IR head that I recently got, and it allows me to engrave on all kinds of metal. I recently did a video on how to sharpen a card scraper, and I gave away a card scraper to everyone that's on my Patreon. And one of the things I did was I included the company, Taylor Toolworks, that sponsored that giveaway, my logo, the hook edge numbers, and I put their names on it. And I was able to do that with this. It's pretty cool. So that's how I use the xTool as a woodworker. I engrave on wood, I cut things out of wood, and I also engrave on metal. As I mentioned in the beginning, if you already have a D1 Pro and you want to upgrade to the 40-watt, it's going to cost you $1,000 currently. If you don't have one and you want to buy in, I think xTool has a bundle right now where you can get the 10-watt head and the 40-watt for I think $1,600. And I don't necessarily understand why they don't just sell the 40-watt as a standalone. I think that would be a great option. That's something that I would have done, just going into it and be good to go. That may change, but as the recording of this video, that's how it is. One of the most common lasers on the market is the Glowforge, and it's a 45-watt CO2 laser. Now, it's not fair to compare a CO2 laser to a diode laser. That is a classic apples to oranges comparison. However, if you want to look just at the wattage, you can get 40 watts with this xTool head versus a 45 watts with Glowforge. The difference is $1,600 versus upwards of $6,000. So the Glowforge is at least twice as expensive or 4 times expensive wattage. Now, the technologies aren't the same, so that's not a fair comparison, but you get my drift. Another thing about the Glowforge, and I haven't used it, but is you can't use Lightburn, and you have to use their software, which is $50 a month. So if you are looking into a 40+ watt laser, to go the Glowforge route, you're gonna spend at least $4,000 or as much as $7,000, and you're going to spend $50 a month using their software. With xTool, you can spend $1,600 and just use Lightburn, which I think is around a $60 to $90 one-time fee. Or you can use their free software, which is okay, but you'll graduate quickly from it. Another point about those CO2 lasers is that you are limited to their bed. But with the xTool, and why I think they're different, is it's an open frame, which means you can take it to a conference table, you can take it to a dining room table, you can take it to something that's odd shaped like a whiskey barrel like I did recently that would never fit in a CO2 laser like the Glowforge. And so I kind of like having that option to where I can put this thing in an enclosure and like leave it in the back of my workshop and kind of use it like most people do with Glowforge, or I could take it to my material regardless of the size. Now, should you splurge on a 40-watt laser? It really depends on your needs. If all you plan on doing is engraving, like say all you want to do is engrave cutting boards, you're honestly fine with a 10-watt laser. My 10-watt laser was perfectly fine engraving in hardwoods like oak and walnut. I never had any problems and never wanted more power when just engraving. If you want to cut things that are about a 1/4 inch or below, a 10-watt, I don't think it will do it, depends on the density of the wood, but a 20-watt will. A 40-watt would be overkill if all you're doing is thin basswood. But if you want to cut things like I want to cut, which is like 3/8 of an inch MDF or even 1/2 inch plywood, the 40-watt is going to be nicer. You're going to be able to run it at full power. You're going to be able to run it up to 400 millimeters a second, which I usually don't do it that high. I usually go around 50 millimeters a second. and the air assist built in is super nice. So it kind of really depends on your use case and your value and your budget. If you're just engraving, you'd be just fine with the lower wattage. If you want to cut thick stuff, you could do the 40 watt. You just want to be very, very careful because you can set things on fire really quickly. Sending a 40 watt laser beam through a material such as wood at 1, 2, 5 millimeters a second is really, really dangerous. Make sure you're using goggles, make sure you have a respirator, make sure you have a ventilated area, and if possible, make sure you have an enclosure and a smoke purifier. I try to be as unbiased as possible, and yet I'm still a human being. Now, I would have bought all of these things from xTool with my own money like I was planning on, and thankfully, because of the position I'm in, I'm able to get these tools in exchange for my opinion, my feedback to them, and my video reviews. And I can honestly say, standing in front of you, if they weren't a sponsor, I would still spend my money with them over all of the other competitors. Now, I got these tools for free, but they did not pay me anything directly. They do not get to control my content. They don't even get previews of this. And if I have an issue, I'll let you know and I let them know. If you ever want to invest in one of these lasers, like a good YouTuber, I have affiliate links below. If you buy through those links, they don't cost you any extra and they help the channel and help pay for things like cameras and lenses and lights and the time that it takes to make videos like this for free on the internet. If you buy any of that stuff or support me in any way, thank you so much. Every little bit helps. I put a ton of effort into these videos to help you make beautiful things with joy. Thanks for watching.